My name is Amol Nirgudkar. I'm the CEO of Patient Prism, and with us we have today Brian Colao from Dykema, who's talking to us about all sorts of trends in dentistry, most importantly the subject of DSOs. And we've discussed a lot, but the focus of this segment really is on regulations as they apply. As I've learned from you, listening to you over the years, is that these are murky waters. There's a lot of regulations that affect DSOs, and you have to really follow the law pretty much to be in compliance, and there's lots of laws. So talk to us about what regulations in general apply to DSOs.
Well, it's very state specific. Unlike some areas of healthcare or some areas of industry that have, an overarching federal law that applies, dentistry is not really like that. There are a few federal regulations. Everybody knows about HIPAA and OSHA and some things like that, but by and large, it's state specific.
Okay.
And what you can do and what you can't do with respect to the DSO model is governed by the individual state law. There's 50 separate state dental practices acts and related regulations, so it becomes very state specific. We rate states as lenient, strict, moderate, and strict moderate for what their entire regulatory scheme is. And so a lot of what you can do or can't do will depend on the state in which you're conducting business in. But generally, Amal, there's two categories of regulations. The regulations governing the DSO structure and model itself, meaning, what can you do with your structure, what can you do with your DSO business agreements, and those would be corporate practice of dentistry, fee splitting regulations. They would typically govern the DSO relationship and DSO model itself. And then the second broad category is just once your organization is up and running and properly structured, what regulations apply. And there's dozens. I mean, HIPAA and OSHA and IRS regulations, labor and employment regulations, advertising and marketing regulations. You do a lot of call center work. There's call warning statutes that you have to comply with for what your scripts in the call center can say. There's trade name regulations. I mean, lots and lots of ongoing, as your business operates, regulations.
Are these regulations in place because you're a bigger structure, or is obviously if you're just a solo practitioner, let's say in the worst regulated state, let's say it's North Carolina, right? It's the toughest, I don't know, is North Carolina the toughest state?
For DSOs it is.
For DSOs it is. But if you're just a single practice, it's not as onerous, right? The regulations are not as onerous.
It's more a case of being, as you scale up and as you get bigger, you start to do things that now subject you to regulations.
Okay.
I mean, for example, is a solo practitioner going to have a call center? Probably unlikely. So all of a sudden, a lot of the advertising and marketing regulations, a lot of the call center warning statutes that would come into play for a DSO with hundreds of offices, they just don't apply to a smaller office. It's not like the regulation isn't there. It just, and if a solo practitioner decides to have a call center, they would have to comply, but practically they're just not going to do it.
And so what happens, what if there's many DSOs that we know of that are in multiple states? So you have to then comply with each state separately?
Yeah, you have to tailor their DSO structure to the specific state. You also have to tailor their DSO business agreements to the specific state. I mean, some of my clients might be in California and Arizona. They're right on that side of the country. It's very common that they'll be in those two states. In Arizona, it's one of the few states where the corporation of non-dentists can directly own the dental office. So you would be in Arizona and you can directly employ the dentist and own the practice, and then you go across the border to California and God help you. I mean, it's one of the stricter states, and there's lots and lots of things we have to follow there. I can tell you most definitely cannot own the practice as a non-dentist in California. So it becomes, depending on the state you're in, the structure can be different and the agreements can be different.
And so what happens? I mean, obviously, as you grow from state to state to state, I mean, the compliance burden kind of rises. in your DSO. But what are the consequences? Like, what if you don't do something right? Are they pretty strict? I mean, can they shut you down? What's obviously the worst case scenario?
Well,
right?
I mean, the worst case is an extinction event. I mean, there's been situations where Medicaid regulations were violated and the authorities came in and just shut the operation down entirely. So, that's extreme, but you asked for the worst case. I mean, likely things that can happen is you get investigated, you have to pay fines. Nobody wants to all of a sudden have to pay an unbudgeted several $100,000 fine that nobody planned on at the beginning of the year. Another thing that's often overlooked, I think people do understand that if the regulators come in, you can pay fines and penalties. I mean, nobody likes it, but they do understand that.
Sure.
What people don't always understand is you might lose your doctors. I mean, the best way to ruin doctor relations and to ruin your ability to attract and retain talent is if you put their license at risk. You could have a situation with, because your organization is not compliant, people that work for you, now they're getting demerits on their licenses, they're getting sanctioned, they're getting censured, discipline is being applied. They're going to quit and they're going to run as fast as they can to another organization, so you can lose top talent, and then they're going to tell all their friends, so when they're gone and the time comes for you to hire a replacement, they're going to say, oh, aren't you the organization that got my friend disciplined on his license? I'm not coming to work for you. So you can lose associate dentists. You will have an inability to attract, new dentists. A lot of really bad things can happen if you're not compliant.
And so what's the best way to stay in compliance?
Well, I mean, one, you have to get proper counseling from the right legal resource that understands the regulations. A lot of folks don't even know the right questions to ask, or they don't even know all of the regulations that apply. So somebody's got to take a comprehensive review of your organization and see where it's vulnerable, see where some recommendations can be made. And then once you've identified that, the key to compliance is three things. Proper policies and procedures, proper training, and proper auditing to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to. And if you can do those things, you'll have a compliant organization.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I think the earlier you do this, the cheaper it is.
Yes.
I mean, it's harder to fix problems afterwards, and because it's hard to unwind some of these things.
Last thing I would say, I mean, you can have a situation where it might cost a couple $1,000s on the front end to get it right, and if you don't do that, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars on the back end.
That's a great note to end on, but as we know, DSO regulations are many and plenty. Important to involve legal counsel at the right time, hopefully at the beginning and not at the end or after you have a problem. This is going to be really, really crucial for people who are thinking about this to understand the breadth of regulations that your state has that revolve around running a successful operation. So thank you so much, Brian.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.